Time's up. Hadron.
Here it comes.
Chevron 1, coded.
For my ally is the Force, and a powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow.
You failed your hunt. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Cry hammer, and let's set the tongues of war.
Chevron 2 is coded.
Conan, what is best in life? Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, to hear the lamentation of your women.
It's all in the reflexes.
I'll also say that you're heavy into martial arts, Tai Chi and all that killer stuff.
I suppose we have to register you as a lethal weapon.
Chevron 3 encoded.
And somebody ought to belt you in the mouth. But I won't. I won't. The hell I will.
Chevron 4 encoded.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Chevron 5 encoded.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Chevron 6 encoded.
Not for while you can, monkey boy.
Great Scott.
Back off, man. I'm a scientist.
I thought I'd die fighting side by side with Al.
What about side by side with a friend?
The day may come when the courage of men fails, when we forsake our friends and break all bonds of fellowship. But it is not this day.
Chevron 7 is locked.
Hail and howdy, everybody. Welcome back to Saturday Night Drive-In, where we are concluding our celebration of Real Star Wars this month on Star Wars Day. Jed, happy Real Star Wars Day.
Happy Real Star Wars Day.
Real Star Wars Day. We're talking Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And I'm ready for this because I was thinking back to when it came out, and it was an experience. Before that, Jed, how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk about Real Star Wars on Real Star Wars Day. I have complicated opinions about this movie, some that I wasn't expecting because it's been a long time since I watched it, but it's still a positive experience. This is still actual Star Wars.
Yes.
It is still something to enjoy on different levels, depending on what your priorities are. But I was given some homework as well on top of watching this film to watch the Tartakovsky Clone Wars for the first time. So I'm looking forward to talking about them with Adam as well tonight. So we'll see how
I forgot to tell you to make sure to find chapters 21 to 25.
I did.
Okay, good. Because I realized when I finished watching, I'm like, wait a minute.
Portion.
I'm like, wait a minute. They didn't, because that first one came out in 2003, but the other ones came out in 2005 as the lead up, which it was a really interesting marketing campaign they did. But hail and howdy to everybody across both our chats. We're happy to have you guys here. We hope you enjoyed the rest of the show. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channels, and we are ready to talk Real Star Wars because, like you said, I've always had mixed feelings on this movie. Even though I've always enjoyed it, I've always had mixed feelings because you have to understand, back then, we got through Phantom Menace. We got through Attack of the Clones, and there's all kinds of mixed feelings about OT fans and the PT fan era. And we're going to Revenge of the Sith, and we're thinking, what is going to happen? How much Darth Vader are we going to get? And a lot of us had it built up in our minds that we were going to get half a movie of Darth Vader, full regalia, breathing, red lightsaber, hunting down the Jedi. And when that didn't happen way back then, a lot of us felt put off. We really did. We were not happy. And it took a long time to come to terms with that. At least it did for me. Where now I watch Revenge of the Sith and I enjoy it for what it is. I enjoy its highs and lows. And while it is, as it's been said in the chat, we said before, it is the best of the prequel movies. It is the most well constructed, the best paced, arguably definitely the best written of all three movies. Even though there is still if everything Anakin and Padme is cringe to the maximum still. It still is. It's something they didn't manage to solve in 3 movies, but we'll get to that. But I've come to terms with it, but still, I can never help but think how badass it would have been to have Mustafar happen at the end of the second act, and then the entire third act is the Jedi Purge, or at least the beginning of the Jedi Purge.
I think the Jedi Purge makes so much more sense than how Order 66 is portrayed in the film. Like Order 66, that's a great
still
scene. The
happens,
music,
yeah.
especially.
It gets
the music,
me every time.
That's one of the best tracks from the prequels. It's just so haunting, and I love it. But in the film, it definitely implies that all the Jedi were killed right then and there.
All the Jedi in command of units. I mean, there were scattered, and there were very few left at that point. There were only several hundred left, not counting Padawans in the temple and younglings. But that gets me every time, because that sorrowful track score from John Williams, watching Yoda, who's the most force sensitive one at this point, feeling the death across the galaxy of everything, and it nearly breaks him in that moment, and watching them die. I hate it. I hate it because, listen, I'm not going to play to the Empire along with the Empire. No, I like the Jedi. I'm not rooting for the Empire in anything. I like the Jedi, and watching the Jedi fall, it sucks for me. And even though I know it's coming every time, watching them all get betrayed and murdered, and I don't blame the clones. It was a program. It was programmed into their genetic makeup, to
which I think is something that the Filoni Clone Wars does a really good job setting up.
One of the 3 things. Yeah, one of the 3 things that works out of Clone Wars. Yeah, so you won't get an argument from me on that. That does work. But then again,
what are the 3 for you? I know Mortis Blade and Fives. What's the third one?
This one, Mortis Blade, and the third one, it has to really. It's kind of around. I want to say, when did it happen? Shit, I think it was season. I've only seen it all the way through twice, so I'm not clear when it happens. It's. You know what? I forgot it. I forgot what the third is. I really did. I always focus on these 2. I know there's one more out there, but I haven't actually watched it all the way through since 2019. So I can't. It's like right there time I'm trying to pick an episode that can lock me into it. Problem is, though, because I just watched the Tartakovsky stuff the other day, that's what's in the forefront of my mind.
Well, it's an interesting comparison because, yeah, just like you, 2019 was the last time I watched the Filoni Clone Wars, and after Attack of the Clones last week, I started showing the Filoni Clone Wars to Rachel for the first time. So we're about through season 1 over the course of the last week, and I'll get to what you're talking about eventually, but I'm not sure what part it is. But comparing the Clone Wars actively was interesting.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it'll come to me. I know there's one more thing in all of it that I found okay. But maybe it's the Admiral Akbar stuff. I always kind of was okay with that.
The Mon Calamari episode
that kind of worked for me.
Or the arc.
But I always keep coming back to how the Mandalorians are ruined, how Dathomir is ruined, how unnecessary Maul returning really is. I mean, I can't say I do like Palpatine versus Maul and Savage. It's a really cool sequence. It's an excellent sequence, but it shouldn't exist.
Yeah,
it's an excellent sequence, but it shouldn't exist. And most everything with Ahsoka up until towards the end, where she's an actual character and not just being.
She grows up. Yeah, she grows up a lot. And I like that arc. I compare it to Ciri a lot. Ciri in the book started out as a whiny, entitled brat, and then experience sharpened her into a lethal warrior, justifiably so.
Yeah. See, the problem is, it has to be something between around season 3, because 5 is Maul, right? Season 5 was Maul.
I think so.
Yeah. So everything after season 5, and I guess some points in season 6 where their snapshots of the war are interesting. But now every time, do I sound okay to you?
You sound normal.
YouTube keeps telling me I'm having audio bitrate problems all the time right now.
Oh yeah, no, that's
And
just the thing
okay.
it does. You sound
Okay.
fine.
Okay. All right. Sorry to break my chain of thought there, everybody. But let's jump right. Let's do the comparison first because we're gonna take this moment since we've got time today. 'Cause it's only two of us. We blocked it out in case there was more panel before Doctor Who Cares reviews. We could take a little moment and make this a little bit of a Star Wars Day discussion in the sense that let's talk the Clone Wars and Tartakovsky. Um, Now I love the Tartakovsky stuff because to me, being an old school fan of Samurai Jack, having seen that before he did that, I was already introduced to Tartakovsky and what he can do. And you got to admit, the dude is a master of show don't tell, of just scenery and sounds and action without a lot of dialogue to screw things up. And the first 20 chapters are okay. It's those last 4 or 5 leading up to Revenge of the Sith, which were specifically made as a tie-in to get us into it, especially those final episodes, because people who missed that, who only watched, Filoni Clone Wars, don't understand that Tartakovsky was given marching orders by Lucas to animate the beginning of the Battle of Coruscant and the kidnapping of Palpatine and to lead into Revenge of the Sith. And I have to ask you this now, Jed. Which Grievous do you like the best?
Which Grievous?
Yeah.
I mean, out of the 2 Clone Wars or out of Revenge of the Sith in there too?
You could throw it in there too because Revenge of the Sith is not the best Grievous. He's not.
I would say Revenge of the Sith is my favorite, and then
Really?
the Filoni one, and then the Tartakovsky is the
Oh
last one.
man, I love that Tartakovsky one because that was the
I
first time
did
we were
not like
introduced
the
to him.
Tartakovsky Clone Wars whatsoever. I just finished them.
Really? You
an
didn't
hour
like it?
ago. I didn't like it at all. It was
wow.
There was no plot story. It was just random snippets of random stuff going on. Like for a lot of it, it was just Yoda like, oh, there's a fight going on this planet.
But that was the point of it. It was supposed to be
there
snapshots.
was nothing in it. There was no heart, no soul, and the action was just mindless. Clones and droids running at each other. They crashed into each other. There was no tactics. There was no strategy. It was just, and the action was just woo, 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 woo. What's actually happening? Laser shots, fire. Oh wow. And then the lightsaber.
Ted, you're breaking my heart.
Boing. They kept just like bouncing off each other.
Breaking my heart.
I didn't like it. I don't think they're worse than the prequels. I think it's about on par. But what little talking there was written terribly. It was just there was no substance to it. There was absolutely no substance to the Tartakovsky ones. And the animation style, there was no depth to it either. He didn't know what shadows are. He doesn't know what shadows are. I think I've always been in the minority that I like the animation style of the Filoni Clone Wars, but now I can unequivocally say I like the animation of that one way better.
Oh man,
there's nothing that I like about the Tartakovsky ones more than I like about either the movies or the Filoni ones.
Oh man, I loved it. I love Tartakovsky style.
Legata's put it perfectly. Algrim the Strong too.
Listen, the first chunk of it, the mini ones, I didn't like those when they originally came out. What I liked, in retrospect, I love it. I liked the end of it. Anakin versus Ventress. I love that because it's a snapshot of Anakin really not changing. And he keeps going farther and farther away from the Jedi Code, more towards giving into his passions, giving into his emotions.
He was more whiny in the Tartakovsky ones than he was in Attack of the Clones. That is impressive. He was much more a whiny teenage brat. And I didn't think that was possible.
See, I thought
it was worse than Attack of the Clones. He was supposed to evolve. Revenge of the Sith is a little bit less so, but Tartakovsky, which is in between, he's more so.
But then the 21 to 25, when he's been raised to knighthood, and we're getting the shots of them.
It implies he's only a knight, like right before Revenge of the Sith.
Well,
that's weird.
It's basically those snapshots are taking place across the entire span of what the 2.5 years that Filoni's
right, but he didn't become a knight to the last few. Like for the most part, he was a Padawan. And what I always assumed is similar to how Obi-Wan became a knight is after Phantom Menace, he fought Darth Maul, and that was his trials. I always assumed, yes, he didn't beat Count Dooku, but he did pretty well against Count Dooku, so that would be his equivalent to the trials, just like Obi-Wan versus Maul. That's what I'd always assumed, but this is like, no, he barely became a knight right before Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah,
and
well,
they put him in command of all this stuff. I don't know.
the,
I really didn't care for the Tartakovsky.
and then those final five episodes, you know, the battle of Coruscant is so good. It's just
What
it's on display.
happened in them?
Well, what happened is it was all a ploy. I mean, it's Palpatine pulling the strings. It's Grievous rushing in there. It's a lot of distraction, and I gotta say, you have to understand when we were all in the moment. That's our first everybody watched this leading up to Revenge of the Sith. That was our first introduction to Grievous, and we get this giant, imposing, unstoppable droid using lightsabers in crazy ways. And we're watching him own all these Jedi Masters.
He picked up a lightsaber with one of his feet and was just like wobbling. And
he wasn't wobbling. He was not. No, he was not wobbling. He was balanced on one foot.
Dumb.
It looked awesome. It was an unconventional style. He was owning Jedi Masters. You don't understand it. We were all blown away. It was great. And then and then it's a great moment where he's retreating and Mace Windu crushes his chest. That's why he's coughing in the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. But then the problem is we get to Revenge of the Sith and we get Grievous the insult comic dog instead of General Grievous. And
he is the general, so it would make sense if he had some intelligence to him. In the Tartakovsky ones, he's no different than his bodyguards, just better fighter. Like there's no character there.
Well, they didn't do a lot of story. Listen, Clone Wars Grievous is a piece of shit. You got to admit that.
I don't like him fighting Ahsoka in season 1. That was garbage.
Clone Wars Grievous is a piece of. He's horrible. He's
better.
He's only better because they gave him a character, but his character design is horrible in that show. And they didn't. I mean, Tartakovsky was given marching orders. Do these tiny little snippets. We're not doing tons of seasons, and that's the problem when that Filoni did in Clone Wars, that he spread it out and he made these worse, and he continued to convolute the timeline more and more.
He made it feel like this was a time had passed 3 years. In the Tartakovsky ones, I know they're snapshots from across the war, but it feels like it all took place over a week. It's like so much happened and nothing happened.
You can tell more. And we're going to talk about it. We have to lead into it, okay? I'm placing us in the time and the space of when it happened. All right, that was part of I want to do this today.
I'm not saying the Filoni ones are some masterful.
I know you're not.
I know you're not.
I know.
And I do enjoy them a lot. I recognize a lot of flaws, especially in the first 2 seasons. The first 2 seasons are so childish, but I could see Star Wars in there. I can see what was going on, what was their goals. They were expanding the universe. There's a lot of world building. It makes the stakes seem high. They personalize the clones, and I think that's an important thing because
that wasn't a bad thing.
Droids. Yeah. They're not droids. Their lives have value, unlike the droids. But Revenge of the Sith never went into that. So
what I don't like is the obsession over the clones going forward. People are weird.
Oh yeah, post the Clone Wars, with the modern Bad Batch stuff. I think everything cringe, but. Yeah, no, I think it was just good storytelling, just decent storytelling, which I still, after watching the prequels for the first time in a long time, I think the Clone Wars is written better. The Filoni ones have better just base writing talent than the prequels did. And Tartakovsky, there was no writer on.
Well, there's not supposed to. That's
10-year-old boy who's just like going off on lightsaber squeak. It's like a 10-year-old boy just banging his action figures together.
It's a beautiful thing. Tartakovsky's a master. One of these days, you have to watch Samurai Jack. One of these days, you have to watch Samurai Jack.
I doubt if it's the same thing. I doubt there's any substance to it.
Oh, there's substance. Aku. Yeah, you're breaking my heart.
But it was funny. So Rachel watched the first season of the Filoni Clone Wars and the Tartakovskys today, and I didn't lead her in with anything. I didn't really tell her anything about what my opinions were on it. She barely knew that there were Clone Wars to begin with, and so I was just sitting down, someone who isn't a real big fan of Star Wars. She's seen the movies, of course, but it's not a high priority franchise for her. And she was the same way. It's like, this new the Tartakovsky ones, they're crap. What? And she starts going into the art style because she is an artist. She's starting to critique the art style and then talking about the Filoni ones.
Oh man, God, Tartakovsky. We gotta understand. Those of us who were there in the days Samurai Jack to this, we love Tartakovsky. I love Tartakovsky. I love everything about Tartakovsky. I love his show don't tell style. I love his art style. This exaggeration.
What was he showing? Nothing was happening.
What do you think? Nothing was happening. Showing Anakin's descent and all these scenes where the action's going on. It's just minimal dialogue, just showing us nice, clean, crisp
it's minimal
action.
dialogue because like 2-second snapshots of anything, and
That's
it's show don't
Tartakovsky.
it's show don't tell.
Dialogue.
Anakin screamed like a 10-year-old boy when he threw.
That
Ventress
is
off the
great.
cliff.
It's a primal scream. Ah!
No, I laughed at that.
It's great. You're uncultured. Anyway, all right. Let's move on.
This Anakin was worse than Attack of the Clones Anakin. Much worse.
All right, listen. You're wrong, but I still love you. Okay. We're gonna go forward to the movie. All right. So the actual movie, though, it leads right into the Battle of Coruscant. And I will say, out of all 6 movies, this is the strongest opening to all 6 movies. Because
action-wise, yes.
You are, you know what I mean. Because it's so alive. The Battle of Coruscant, the special effects with all the ships, everything seems so precise, and we are fully dialed in with Anakin, with Obi-Wan, with everything going on, and you're ready for this, and it takes off at a hot sprint. And it just the first half of the first act just does not stop. It's just boom, 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 boom. And I think it is, out of all the prequels, and even the original 3, as far as execution goes and pulling you in, it is the best executed opening of all 6 movies. I feel like it does, because it just drives. You're on this ride. It's great. It even has I even like Anakin versus Dooku. I like it. I like, because it's the,
as long as they're not talking, the Anakin versus Dooku is okay.
We have to remember
my powers have doubled since the last time I saw you.
That's the weakness of the dialogue. We're not going to argue that it continues the prequel trend of weak dialogue, but at least 60% of the movie is stronger dialogue than the previous 2.
I would agree.
It's not as clunky as Attack of the Clones at times. And to your point, the way you look at it, it's not as flat as Phantom Menace. So it does its job, but I really love the whole introduction, because even if it's just a moment where Anakin and Obi-Wan are zeroing in, they're getting the battle, they're back and forth, their interactions, how they're dealing with the situation, it gives us a fantastic instant insight as to how they are now. If you haven't seen Tartakovsky, if you hadn't watched the Clone Wars, which didn't exist at the time, it's another 2 years before George decides to make Clone Wars animated series. So it's great at evolving and getting you into it. So it pulls us right in. How do you? You're sort of with me on this, right? You're sort of with me.
At least for the ship combat at the beginning, we'll focus on that. I think that's one of the best ship battles in all 6 movies. It is really, really tight. There's not as much storytelling as some of the ones from the original trilogy, so I'd still prefer the original trilogy ones for the storytelling of the ship battles. But just plain action, it really nails it on the head. Some of the dialogue is rough, even in the ship portions, but the plot still is weak. It's still very, very weak. And this is a criticism that isn't necessarily fair on my part, but something that bothers me, which I won't, it's the subjective side of me, not going into the score at the end, is as I've mentioned a lot of times, prefer hard science. I prefer things to be real, things to make sense and stuff like that. And one of my biggest pet peeves in all sci-fi is, remember, there is no up in space. There is no up, and this fight, it's just so perfectly level on, and so it does feel flat to me in some instances. And the same applies when we're inside the ship. If the gravity, if the ship turns, and like the elevator scene when the gravity falls out and they start falling down the elevator versus walking along the edge, none of that makes any sort of scientific sense. That ship is so far up above the planet that it has to have its internal gravity, which is the thing that Star Wars ships have. So they have gravity inside the ships.
Artificial
and
gravity.
So when it starts to nosedive towards the planet, that wouldn't change the gravity whatsoever.
But
so the elevator scene makes no sense.
See, I interpret that as if the artificial gravity has failed, and let's say inertial dampeners have failed, and everything that creates an artificial normal planet-like environment has failed, then everything's thrown out of whack, and it's as though its own little
It would go zero
its
G.
own ecosystem has failed. So
It would go 0G in that situation, though, not a new down.
See, I don't think like that. So
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's very
my
much a
brain
me
doesn't
thing.
work like that.
These
especially in this
films,
instance.
I really appreciate the distinction that most people have. Star Wars isn't sci-fi; it is fantasy. It is way more fantasy than it is sci-fi. So that distinction helps me out a lot when it's like, all right, this isn't science fiction; it's just fantasy. So that is very much a me thing. So I want, of course, that's very subjective, but stuff like that bothers me. And the fight scene was fine enough. The duels in the prequels are well choreographed and very well performed. But Count Dooku was in this movie for 2 minutes. It felt like. And what dialogue he had was garbage. So I just struggled to be invested. This film is definitely the best of the three.
Yeah.
It's still not leaps and bounds better. Like some people say it's on par with the original trilogy. It's a 9 like all the other original trilogy movies, whereas the other ones are like 6s or whatnot. I disagree. It is better.
Oh, yeah.
But not
I'm going to
leaps
rate
and
this
bounds
one
better.
higher. My score is higher on this one than it is the other two.
Yeah.
Much higher. But no, it's not good. I'll tell you something. I'm not rating this over a 9 like I did, like when we did the OT last year. It doesn't break 9, but it's got moments that are peak and epic. And I guess as far as science goes, again, my brain doesn't necessarily work like that. I'm all in on the scientific fantasy of it, artificial gravity, all that kind of stuff. And if the thing tips, it tips, and it's falling because it's its own enclosed environment. But I can understand because as you said a bunch of times, that's where your head is geared toward when you're doing that kind of stuff. So I understand that, and I agree it shouldn't lose points for that because it's not trying to be that.
I just don't know. I don't understand what's happening in that scene because there's not an alternative to the science presented.
There's a couple of moments in that scene though. I mean, let's get past. Like I said, we know the whole their infiltration, all that stuff. That's just as far as their infiltration goes. I know there are cut scenes. Apparently, I've never actually seen them. There's been some cuts footage. There's a lot of.
Oh, you haven't seen the deleted scenes?
No, I've never been interested because if they're not in the movie, then what do I care?
Oh,
really?
There are some wild ones. There's a scene right after they get into the hangar on Grievous's ship, and they're going to the elevators, right, to go up to where Palpatine's
water
at.
or something. They get wet.
Well, there's that one too, but
people thirst over Hayden Christensen in that one.
they talk to R2, and Anakin's trying to translate what R2's saying over the thing. He's like, no, I think beep boot, and then it becomes R2's voice. He talks in a droid voice, not just like a human imitating a droid voice. Like they replace his voice with R2's voice as he's talking as R2. It is so disconcerting.
That's weird.
It's very weird. And then after they get into the elevator, cut down the droids, they both like giggle to each other and go, Roger, Roger. It's really weird.
Yeah, that deserved to be cut.
It definitely did. And then, of course, the famous Shaak Ti's death scene was cut.
Yeah, I've heard about that one. But the infiltration to me, I excuse some of the campiness because it's giving us that quick introduction to how Obi-Wan and Anakin are with each other now. How their
dynamic is very strong in it.
Yeah.
Definitely supports what we talked about last week, the evolution from father, son to brothers. You can see
the
it right off the
chemistry.
bat.
The chemistry between Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor is great. They have a great rapport. You can feel that they're into it and they're working with it much better than Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman. Even in this movie, they still have zero chemistry together. None.
But still more than the Tartakovsky, Anakin, and Padme.
Oh, God damn it. I'm going to let that go. God, I swear to God, he doesn't want to be cultured, anybody. He doesn't want to be cultured. Don't want to understand.
Hey, the chat's with me for the most part.
Yeah, well, the chat isn't always right, okay?
Wow, you're starting to sound like George Lucas on his prequel quotes from this week. Did you see those?
I saw a couple. We're going to talk about it tomorrow on Roundtable. We are going to talk George Lucas tomorrow. The George Lucas, the contrarian. The contrarian that is George Lucas, and how the stands want to say, I bet all the worst YouTubers are trying to cope with that he loves to see Star Wars. It's like, well, wait a minute. Did you actually read this whole thing? Do you take into account all his past comments? George will contradict himself after a burp because his brain will flip a switch and he'll forget what he just said.
Did you see his quotes justifying why people didn't like the prequels?
I think I did. I've seen a bunch of them. We definitely have
to talk about it because he says it's the audience's fault. It's not his fault.
Okay,
he blames the audience for it. It's bad. It's actually legitimately bad.
Listen, I love George Lucas. I respect him, but I don't treat him like a god, and I can call him a
No.
moron. I called him a moron before he sold, when he was making changes with the Blu-rays before he sold to Disney. I called him a moron then. I will call him a moron now. But he's still George Lucas,
Yeah.
and I love him, and I wanted him to keep doing it because, I mean, keep making Star Wars and not sell it. Star Wars would be in a better place if he had never sold it right now. It would still be a $1 billion
Absolutely.
franchise. It would still be worth more than it is now. Anyway, different topic tomorrow. We will talk George Lucas tomorrow. But the whole Anakin Obi-Wan works here, and then we get up there. What I love about the conversation with Dooku is George Lucas parallels. That's the exact same observation throne Palpatine sitting in Death Star 2.
It's poetry. It rhymes.
That's when it actually works, though. When he acts, that's what he actually means, and not the bastardized
In the most
way.
superficial sense possible, yes.
Yeah, it's like, hey, but see, at this point, remember, it's for the people who were there 20 years before. We're supposed to see the thing. Oh, look, that's exactly how he's supposed to be. He's not captured. He's overseeing the battle. He's pulling this and that, and he is manipulating everything. And I got to say, Ian McDermott does great through this whole movie for me. Just the manipulative Palpatine, and when he goes full ham, Sidious after the fight with Windu, it's just, I love it. So camp, it's good.
I think he does a good job, but I think his writing might be worse in this movie than the previous.
I'm just talking about him. I'm just talking about him.
Absolutely. He does a great job. Even with the campy stuff, he makes it believable still.
Yeah.
But the writing in the first two prequels, there's so much subtlety, and it's all about manipulation. Like, you can see little things about what he's doing, what his true plans are. This one, he just loses all subtlety, all tact. He's just like, yo, Anakin, I know lots of stuff about the Sith, and it just comes out of nowhere.
Here's the problem with that.
Really set that up either.
I've heard, and I haven't read it because I never really wanted to read the book adaptation of the movies. I've heard that the book adaptation, or Revenge of the Sith, really makes it much clearer, a much better picture of what's going on there. That they left a lot
I
out.
don't remember though, because like I've talked about before, I wasn't allowed to watch this movie as a kid, so Lego Star Wars was my first introduction to what actually happened in Revenge of the Sith. And then when I was like 12 or 13, I got my hands on the novelization of Revenge of the Sith and read it, but I don't really remember any of it.
I've been told it does a lot better of setting up Anakin's fall and setting up Palpatine's manipulation techniques, and why at this point Anakin's so easily tilted to one side. They give you moments in the movie, like when he kills Dooku. When he gives into his anger there, Dooku taunts him, and Anakin beats him going dark side there. He gave into anger and rage. That's how he beat him, plain and simple. And then Palpatine manipulates him. Oh, you had to do it. He was too dangerous. It's okay.
Before
like
that,
he killed all the sand people. It's all right.
Dooku, I mean, yes, he's very loyal to his cause, but he is training Ventress, as we even know from the Clone Wars. Like, he's not fully like, hey, Palpatine's going to be the big bad forever. He, like any other Sith, wants to overthrow his master. Why is he so loyal up into his death? He had several minutes where not minutes, but a long time where Palpatine's like, yeah, kill him. He could say anything. He could.
I think it's shock. Right there. Because look, Christopher Lee does a great expression of, are you kidding me? You're going to let him kill me? And then boom, dead.
That can work for some characters, shock overwhelming them, but the Dooku that we've seen portrayed in these two films at least, and then of course the Clone Wars as well, both of them, he's very in control. He's very intelligent. He's very manipulative. Like, this is a very smart man. I say he comes across as smarter than even Palpatine, at least the fake Palpatine that everyone sees in the Senate. But he seems incredibly intelligent. He reacts well. We never see him even flustered up until his hands get cut off. Like, he fighting Yoda, nothing. Like, even when he's losing to Yoda in the last film, he's in control. He doesn't let his emotions come. He's more put together than most Jedi. I don't see shock as being a good enough explanation for this character. Other characters, yep, that would be plenty. But you've got minutes to save your life, to ruin the man who's actively trying to get you killed. It just seems weak and like an excuse, honestly. And I think it would have been better if perhaps he'd been knocked out or something, and that way Anakin's execution was much more cold-blooded. So he wasn't there to defend himself, wasn't there to reveal Palpatine, and the weight that it had on Anakin was so much higher. Like, oh my God, he killed an unconscious man. That is really bad. That would hold a lot more weight because other Jedi would do the same thing in a situation. We saw what's his bucket. Mace Windu at the end was willing to kill an unarmed prisoner with Palpatine.
Well, Palpatine wasn't unarmed. He had just been using Force lightning. So
right, but I mean, virtually. And like, there are other Jedis who would have done what Anakin did in that moment. So making him unconscious sells the part, better sells. This is a dark side move. Palpatine's actually pushing him to do something evil, but Dooku's not awake to mess up with his plans because that's got to be a concern.
I understand what you're saying. Legatus is making a point in the chat how Dooku was apparently, he thought the whole plan was to be arrested and spend time in jail until the whole thing was over. But I honestly think this is George rushing things.
It's very rushed.
It's just, okay, let's just hurry up and get through this so that we can get to Anakin's fall and start that ball rolling. And I mean, Christopher Lee, it was it's another 10 years before he passes away at this point. So he wasn't on death's door. He was still capable of acting and doing all this stuff, but maybe he didn't want to do much more than what essentially a cameo in the beginning here.
Well, just a little change would have all it would have taken, and that would less work for him if they knock him on. It just seems.
I've honestly never thought about it much more than Anakin ganks him because Palpatine goes, "Do it," and it's kind of it to me. It's the conditioning that Palpatine has been conditioning Anakin all this time to listen to his orders, to listen to his manipulation. And when Anakin is faltering right there for a second, no, he needs to be arrested, and Anakin goes. I'm sorry, Palpatine goes, "Do it," and then it just doesn't hesitate. Boom, kill, and does it. So that's how I've always interpreted it. I've never thought more along the lines of why Dooku didn't say anything, because to me, he didn't have time. I've always felt he didn't have time. It was always boom, shock. This is not the plan, and because as soon as he looks at Palpatine and if she says "Do it," Anakin goes zoop, and it's over. So. But I still like the whole sequence. And then right away you get Anakin when Palpatine tries to say leave Obi-Wan, he's done. Then Anakin researches himself over what would later become Vader, says, no, we're gonna take him with us. He's still alive. That part of me that is still good is gonna take the man I see as my brother. We're gonna get out of here. And there's one point to and I noticed it today for the first time when I was rewatching it. Maybe because somehow I had the instinctual knowledge you were going to bring up the whole attitude of the change of angle in the ship falling. When they're falling down the elevator shaft and they have no way to stop the plummet because there's the elevators come down and they pull up the grappling hooks. Anakin and Obi-Wan pull up the grappling hooks. They grab it doing this. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. Palps ain't even holding on to Anakin's legs anymore. They're all free falling. At the very last second, when they swing into the elevator chute, Palpatine skillfully grabs Anakin's legs and swings himself into the hallway. I noticed that today, and I realized, wow, it's a blink and you miss it moment, and it just shows me that he's in control of the whole situation.
That shows good for Palpatine being in control, but not so good for Anakin trying to save his life. Doesn't even think to grab him.
Well, he was grabbing on him. Palpatine was holding onto his legs because when the ship loses its control, Palpatine was in front, running ahead, and when they were all hanging there, he grabbed onto Anakin's legs. But when they were falling, everybody was in free fall, no grabbing on. But I noticed that today. I realized, wait a minute. Palpatine, how's he getting out of here? He's no longer holding on to Anakin's legs. I never noticed that. And then the last second, I watched him grab Anakin's legs and use that to swing himself into the hallway, which is a total Force user move. That's not an old man who's decrepit. But I caught that today and I found it interesting. And it sparked my memory because you were talking about the whole thing and the pitch and this, that, anyway. And then we're pretty much at the end. We get the interaction with Grievous, and we get. And this is why I have always fault and danger with Filoni Clone Wars, because every time Grievous interacts with somebody, I'm reminded of how many times he interacted with them in the Clone Wars. I mean, he interacted with Obi-Wan multiple times in the Clone Wars.
Right.
And he didn't interact with Anakin, though, right? He didn't?
No,
Ever?
because he specific like the interaction with Anakin and
Yeah.
Grievous is very clear in Revenge of the Sith. They've never met each other, so the Clone Wars make sure they never do.
Yeah,
They,
that's the
they
one
keep that
thing, though.
accurate.
But they do mess up by having Anakin and Dooku face off once or twice, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean that
Yeah.
one's a lot less explicit, but I do find that stupid.
Yeah.
I do agree that they had to play with the edges a little bit when it came to those situations, but they did a really impressive job keeping Anakin away from Grievous.
Yeah, that I'll give that, and I'm going to say that's more George than Filoni. I'll say
Yeah.
that's more that.
And what I mean by it's a lot more ambiguous is Anakin's always saying stupid shit. So maybe he legitimately does think, oh, in the 6 months or a year since the last time I fought, my skills have doubled, just bragging. Like I can totally see Revenge of the Sith Anakin talking about, oh yeah, I saw you 6 months ago and I'm so much better now.
I just that was always my biggest problem with Clone Wars is they kept doing things that conflicted with the movie. And
I mean, I wouldn't even call that conflicting. That one, it does take, it is a stretch, but it's not a conflict.
To me, it always felt like a conflict. You have to jump through hoops to make it work.
Yeah.
But at least, like what I was gonna say, I am giving a compliment. At least they didn't do it with Grievous. They managed to keep them separate so that line remains intact. You get the whole thing going the crashing ship, and I love the crashing ship because I always thought, and it was confirmed to me in the Millennium Falcon book, that the original version of the Millennium Falcon is there when the ship is crashing. It's there. And I don't know if they show it, but it is there. I remember in the book when I was reading, like, oh shit, it was there. And it's that I love that kind of tie-in. It's like, oh, we're gonna.
I pointed out to Rachel, I like it as an Easter egg, but if it is the real one canonically, that bothers me because it's a big galaxy. But
you got to say the Millennium Falcon we get to in A New Hope, it's been rebuilt 2 or 3 times since then. It's not originally a YT-1600.
If it were just the same model of ship, that's totally fine. There's plenty of duplicates, I'm sure, but it being the same one, even if it's been rebuilt,
it's the journey of the Millennium Falcon where it was at the battle. It's not necessarily there, but it was at the Battle of Coruscant, and it suffered its damage. I mean, I haven't reread Millennium Falcon in a while, but it suffered certain damage, and then it constantly gets rebuilt until it becomes the YT-1600 that Lando gets a hold of. So
it just
what
feels
you see
very
there,
coincidental.
it isn't there. Well, it's not. I don't think it's coincidental. It's just the journey of this ship as it was touching it. It starts at this point in history. And then it's not present in other major points in history. It's just I loved it that in the book it confirms that the original form of Millennium Falcon, not the YT-1600, was there, and it suffered damage, and that began the journey of it being refitted and reconstructed into the beloved ship that is iconic in science fiction. But that whole thing happens. Now here's where the rest of the first act kind of drags. Because it's after this high octane move, it slows down. We get a bunch of character interactions, and I know it's all set up, but it's one of these instances where I think the second act picks up the pace for the first time in all 3 movies. When suddenly you go on the hunt for Grievous. And all those things. Am I breaking it down correctly? Or Anakin's fall I think more accurately, Anakin's fall. As we're watching the manipulation, as we're watching him become angry at the Jedi, as Palpatine is pulling the strings, and it picks up the pace enough that the character interactions, once we get to that point in the second act, are working for me. So I feel like I'm losing my point. I don't know where I am anymore. That's my point.
I mean, it is a slow second act, but it still does more than the prequel, the previous 2 prequels did in the second act. It's still not a whole lot going on. It's still bad dialogue. It's still Palpatine's god awful manipulation of Anakin. But I would say it is the best second act.
The Palpatine speech about Plagueis is great. I love it.
It's so over dramatic, like his
But
7 head turns.
But I love it, and I love that look on his face when he goes, "How ironic that he gave his apprentice all this knowledge." It's like he killed. It's that little
I
smile.
don't think that's a
you know,
good bit
I
of
love it.
writing.
I love
That's
it.
something that
I
I would
didn't- I
want to be
just love
shown,
it.
not told, because we get it. We get the irony. It's clear. We got it. We don't need, hey guys, what I said, ironic thing is ironic. Get it? Get it? It was like a nod.
I
to
love the
5-year-olds.
smile, though. I love the smile. That little.
We just need the
it's me and
smile.
I killed him. It's me.
That's all we need. Is just have him do the smile, and that's it.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
The dialogue was the problem.
See, I to me that whole scene just works, because it's Palpatine. Like you said before, he's pulling the mask off completely now. He's not. He knows we're in the final moments of this war. Everything's literally falling into place as he has planned it, and he's not messing around anymore. He's just doing it. He's doing it, and he's going to have fun with it. And he is now pushing Anakin harder than ever to flip, because the Jedi Council have behaved exactly as Palpatine would predict they would behave. Their dogmatic approach to everything is pushing Anakin farther and farther away from the Jedi code into the Sith code. And even though Anakin sometimes keeps trying to rely on the Jedi code, the Jedi way to say I shouldn't do this, it's flimsy, it's weak, and I like the whole way it's constructed. I just do, and I feel it works because I'm enjoying watching Palpatine work. I think that's the core of it. I'm enjoying watching Palpatine work. I'm enjoying him being the puppet master here, because it's called Revenge of the Sith. We know the bad guys are going to win here. We know what's going to happen, and I like it playing out at this point. Even though, as I said at the beginning of the movie, I didn't necessarily want it to be this way for a long time, but considering this is what it is, I enjoy it for what it is now, and I enjoy the ham. I enjoy the camp. I just do. I'm okay with it. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to pretend. I'm going to say I like this stuff. I'm okay with it. It's fun for me. It's fun for me. And
it's definitely a fun movie. I would agree with that. This is definitely the most critical I've ever watched the film, but I still enjoy this film. It's the one prequel that I still think it's okay. It improves upon its predecessors, and it's just plain fun. The action is really good in this film, unlike the predecessors to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So it being fun, I will 100% agree with people on that.
I have I do have criticisms though of certain choreographies though. I really think that Ian McDermott should not have pushed to let him be the actual physical stand-in for the lightsaber.
That was rough. That was really rough.
It always looks bad. They should have done a Christopher Lee and let somebody CGI face on there, because we know Sam Jackson could do choreography. He was still young enough there. He could have done some choreography. Mace Windu versus Palpatine. And I know I've heard the story told a lot of times that in the novelization, there's a whole Anakin versus Mace Windu duel in the novelization, or maybe it was a video game. I don't know. I've heard it told a couple of ways.
Yeah,
but
the other Jedi, that choreography.
Oh man,
really bad
I mean, I get you're going to show us that Palpatine Sidious is so good he's going to ace 3 Jedi Masters in 2 seconds. I get that, but it just looked awkward with Ian.
It looked really awkward. Well, this is an explanation for that I've heard before. Now, I don't know if this is Disney fanfic or actual canon, so that's what I'm going to address here.
Okay.
I've heard it said that scream he does before doing his spin through the air is a Sith force trick to root fear in your enemy. Like, it can paralyze those weaker in the force.
I've never even heard that. I just always attribute that as just basically there is a Sith ability, a dark side ability called Force Scream, but I don't know if that was it.
That sounds like what I've heard, so that's might be what we're talking about.
Yeah,
here,
I mean,
but
I don't know if he used a force. Because if you in KOTOR, when they gave some real detail, Force Scream can stun an enemy. It
that
can
would make
stun an
sense.
enemy. So I would have to hear George tell me this that he used Force Scream to stun Kit Fisto and the other 2 guys before they got ganked or slowed down. And I can understand Mace Windu making his saving throw and not being manipulated.
It still looks really dull. Like it was not executed well. You can find plenty of justifications for how it happened. It's just execution was the problem.
And if we want to pull in Clone Wars lore, if we're going to tie it in there, he has lost his second lightsaber at this point because he had recently lost it in the duel between Maul and Savage. He only had, because Palpatine, if you go by Clone Wars lore, Palpatine's a dual wielder. He knows Juyo, the Juyo style. So he knows how to do that. So that's his preferred fighting style. He only has one lightsaber at this point, but still, it's an awkward fight scene because it's Ian McDermott, who clearly didn't do anything real choreography, and they did, and because of that, they didn't have Sam Jackson really trained for any choreography there. Just let a woof, woof. I'm gonna fan out a little bit and little tit for tat. Listen, we can be critical of this. I criticize Disney Star Wars choreography all the time.
I'd say this is still better.
It's better. No, it's better. It's better because they're not just hitting light sticks at each other. But we have to compare it because we've already had decent choreography because the stunt double for Christopher Lee against Anakin that was done really well. And then later on, you've got Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen at Battle of Heroes on Mustafar going full steam, full light speed at each other with those moves.
Yeah, I criticize Hayden Christensen a lot. Like his redemption arc that people have had with him in the last few years is fine. I still don't think he's good, but as a human being, he seems like a great guy. But I still don't think he's great in the movie. Exactly. But when it comes to his dedication to the fight choreography, it's hard to criticize him because he and just the role in general, like he put so much work and effort into the physicality of Anakin that it is impressive. And he is someone
who was in good shape too. He was in really good shape during that because you saw it.
Caring is valuable. Caring about a role is important. He definitely had that in spades.
Yeah, and he's always cared about it. So we're going back in time. My anger in the past was more along not because I hated him, but it was more because I didn't get the story I expected. And it translated at the time as screw Hayden Christensen. Oh, no. Now it's, listen, the guy did the best he could. And like you said, when you watch the physical aspects of his performance, he didn't cheat. He put the time in. And
could be said he should have spent some of that time on hiring an acting coach, but
maybe. I think the biggest problem with his acting a lot is his intonations, his tone at times. It seems it's off. The whole during the confrontation with Obi-Wan, they're back and forth. You turn her against me.
It's really bad. And yeah, his facial expressions rarely match. Rachel said he has 3 main facial expressions: blankness, constipation, and crying. Those are his 3 facial expressions.
But he still is Anakin Skywalker, and I will not take that away from him. I won't deny it because in the end, I can look past that and I can still see the character of Anakin. When we're looking at this whole movie, even though he doesn't do the best job, I can watch Anakin breaking down and Vader taking over. And one of the moments for that is, or what I always call the last gasp of Anakin, is right after he slaughtered the Separatist leaders on Mustafar, and the John Williams track is it's at its peak, and you get that close up, and you see a single tear going down his cheek, and that I always call that the last gasp of anything, because that is the moment Anakin Skywalker gave up and let Darth Vader take over. Because when Padme lands and they see each other, that's Darth Vader. That's not Anakin Skywalker anymore. Because that's one of the conversations that have been had over the years, that Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader are still the same person. No, they are 2 separate entities. And even though it could have been done better, you can track in the movie as Vader, what would become Vader, takes over more and more, where Anakin stops trying to put up the feeble defense of it's not the Jedi way. This. No, now when he cuts off Mace Windu's arm and says, "What have I done?" That's Anakin asking, "What have I done?" But then 2 seconds later, Vader, as he's given his Sith name, he is then
It
in the
has to
driver's
be a
seat.
different person, otherwise there's a problem because he goes from 0 to 1,000 very quickly.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, I cut off Mace Windu's arm. Oh, I'm feeling regret. To 10 minutes later, I'm gonna slaughter children. Like there has to
Yeah.
be a
Because
that's
that's
0
the
to
thing.
1,000.
Palpatine actually says, "I'm sending you in." It basically says, "I'm sending you into the Jedi Temple to slaughter everything because that's going to make." He says that will make you stronger in the dark side. He's sending him in there to do the murderous deeds because it will drown him in hate. And the thing is, I will argue that Anakin, while he has his hate for the Jedi, Anakin hating himself for becoming Vader is as much a drive for his fall. Because that last shear, the last gasp of Anakin, he hates himself in that moment because he is betrayed everything he stood for. And he is now, he is a tiny little voice inside this monster that will now take over and slaughter thousands, some say millions of people for the next 20 years.
Oh, by the time we get to A New Hope, I would definitely say millions. I mean,
Well,
he was working with the Death Star, so
Well, I
Alderaan.
mean, people want to people. I think we talked about this last year. People mistake you say Vader killed millions of people on Death Star. No, Tarkin killed millions of people on the Death
Yeah.
Star. Tarkin pulled the trigger on that one. Vader was just standing there holding Leia. Now he's not just following orders. He wasn't going to stop him or anything.
Yeah.
Tarkin was in command of the Death Star. Vader did not kill Alderaan. Tarkin killed Alderaan, but Vader.
I
through
can see a
his-
degree of guilt on his part, especially with how
Oh,
high
oh,
up
no.
in command he was. He was helping.
Guilt by association. Yeah.
Yeah,
But-
absolutely.
He didn't give the command to destroy Alderaan. But
No.
that aside, 20 years, essentially, 18, 20 years of basically slaughtering people to chokehold the galaxy and the Empire. Yeah, or giving the command to basically maybe have a Star Destroyer bombard a planet from orbit. Vader had a very, very large death toll under his belt.
Absolutely.
We're not going to make any bones about that. But Anakin, maybe in the hundreds or thousands if you count what went on in the Clone Wars.
Yeah, the Clone Wars, that's hard. That's not murder per se.
Well, he
that's
did
the
kill those
war.
sand people. He did murder
did
those
kill
sand people, but they deserved it. They deserved it because they are animals. I said it. Sand people are animals. There's no.
Well,
they're
don't
not-
tell Disney Star Wars fans that.
I will every day and be proud of it. But yeah, Anakin and Vader are two different things, and especially good. And that's I want to make the argument that Dooku was never fully Sith because he never had Sith eyes. I love it how Anakin has Sith eyes at that point. That shows you how that probably subtly, and it's probably shown in the novelization more, how Palpatine had been subtly teaching him Sith arts and Sith belief systems for years. We're talking over a decade because he says
And
he's been my mentor and ever since I
That
got
didn't
here.
clue him in at all.
He's an impressionable young man.
He's a
He doesn't-
moron.
Well, okay, maybe Anakin's not the brightest bulb in the pack. Okay, I never said he was, but as Vader, he was smart as Vader. But Anakin was manipulated for years, probably thought, which is why when after he slaughters the Jedi Temple and goes and kills everybody at Mustafar, that's why he has Sith eyes, because the indoctrination's been going on for a very long time. So that he knows Sith arts, he knows Sith belief systems, which is why he is a Sith at that point. Because at this time, we're far enough along in the time you got to understand, yes, there was an actual Sith race way back in the day, red little tendrils on the face, but Sith is also a belief system. It's not necessarily a pure blood Sith race, but it's an art, it's a style, it's
Using the dark side doesn't make you a Sith.
Yeah, exactly. That is a misconception that a lot of, I want to say, average Star Wars fans have. They think somebody uses the dark side. Oh, they're a Sith. No, there are Sith arts and there are dark side arts.
That is one thing that Asin and Tartakovsky's get partial points from me, pointing out Dooku telling Ventress, "You're not a Sith. You're strong in the dark side, but you're not a Sith." And then he undoes it by saying Sith don't have fear. That is
a bad line. That is a bad line. I'll give you that one. That was not a good line. That was basically, fear is the doorway through which it all walks. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. or is it fear leads to hate?
Yeah.
No,
No, you had a fear
yeah,
leads to
yeah.
anger, anger leads to
Anger leads
hate,
to
hate leads to suffering.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm not going to try and say the Sith code because I never remember the Sith code. I never remember it. I only have to remember it when I have to fill in the blanks in a video game. But Anakin's fall, despite the middling performance of Hayden Christensen, it's portrayed well throughout the movie,
Yeah.
and I appreciate that final moment. I really want to talk about the end of the movie here because that's where all the best stuff happens. I think. I mean, we don't need to spend time talking about Obi-Wan, do we? I mean, do you want to talk about Obi-Wan?
I mean, the General Grievous stuff I think
Yeah.
is okay. The duels,
The duel is. I've never been a fan of the duel.
It's fine. I think it's ridiculous that he tries to kick Grievous with his shin. Like you wouldn't want to do that with a person, let alone a robo leg.
I think that was desperation. I don't know.
Might be,
I don't like the way the fight plays out. I really don't like the way the Obi-Wan Grievous fight plays out.
The music's incredible.
Oh,
but
every track in this score is.
I would say it's the strongest of the prequel trilogy, just as a whole album.
Oh, you're right. You're absolutely.
Duel
you're
of the
absolutely
Fates might be a better single
that's
track.
That's isolated, dude. They put Duel of the Fates in this movie. They put it in the movie.
As a full album, this one it might even be the best, except for maybe Empire.
Empire is the best. But out of the prequel trilogy, this is the best soundtrack out of the prequel trilogy. I will say that. No, Empire Strikes Back has the best soundtrack. That has the best soundtrack. But this one has such a strong soundtrack. The entire symphonic flow on the Battle of Mustafar is just a work of art from John Williams. A complete work of art.
And one that's underrated, I think, is it's not a great scene, but the music, the choral music is incredible when Anakin and Padme are staring at each other across the city. I love that soundtrack. The scene's rough because of acting, but I love that soundtrack.
Yeah. Well, John Williams understands when to put good choral music in. When Vader is Vader, as we would know him, and rising up on the operating table, the sorrowful choral music is just so good. It's so good. We'll get. I'll talk about that final scene in a minute. I just want to go through. So we Obi-Wan. Ewan McGregor does a great job. I mean,
yeah,
he
definitely
is
my
Obi-Wan.
favorite. It's definitely the best Ewan McGregor film, I think.
I think it took 2 movies for him to get comfortable as Obi-Wan. Honestly,
yeah, he was very comfortable. The sass was strong in this one.
Yes, the Obi-Wan one-liners are fantastic. It's like, oh, another happy landing. Another happy. They are great. And
growing up, he was always my favorite character.
Yeah, he is. I would say the best performance in the movie.
I would agree
because it's not last movie. You would say Christopher Lee gives the best performance in the last movie because he's Christopher Lee, but he had 2 seconds. It was a cameo, didn't do much. Ewan McGregor as a performance carries the movie. Because he like Hayden Christensen, Ewan McGregor was into this. He was into it. Their exchanges, you can feel the emotion, how devastating Anakin's betrayal is to Obi-Wan. And it's starting with their exchange. You are my brother.
Even in subtle scenes, not even like that dramatic. Like near the beginning of the film, right after the whole Coruscant fight, when he's pretending to reward Anakin for saving the day by making him spend the day with politicians. Like there's so much going on in his performance in that scene. At least Hayden Christensen's not doing anything, but like Ewan McGregor carries this film.
Yeah,
absolutely.
He is the best performance of the film. He has
Natalie Portman's barely in it.
Her scenes were cut. We know most of her scenes were cut. Her forming the rebellion cells was cut. And I don't really need that. That's not what this movie's about. So I'm okay that those were cut. People claim, "Oh my God, Natalie Portman was cut out of the movie." I don't care. Now, I will complain about Padme in a sense. If she's carrying twins, that's a really small belly.
Oh yeah, she's barely pregnant. It's like 5 months pregnant. It's not 9 months pregnant.
Yeah, and at the same time, I'm sorry, this is science fiction technology. You tell me a medical droid didn't pick up 2 heartbeats in her womb?
Or they didn't have anything for losing the will to live. Please, for the love of God, make Anakin actually kill her, or make complication.
All right. Let's go to that right now. We'll jump to that. We'll jump back to the Battle of Mustafar in a minute. Then, Padme sucks. I'm sorry. You just gave birth to 2 babies who need you.
Exactly. She abandons her kids.
And you're gonna die of a broken heart.
Yeah, like if she had died from actual medical complications, that sucks. That's not her fault, obviously, but she's consciously choosing.
The force choke didn't kill her. She's perfectly fine.
Yeah, that's garbage. She's abandoning her kids. They talk about Anakin being the worst parent, but
Anakin didn't even know
them.
He didn't even know he had to. Yeah.
But once he found out about his kids, he wanted to be there.
Yeah, he wanted to turn to the dark side.
At least he wanted to be there. There's points I'll give him for that.
Vader is a good dad. Listen, he taught Luke a hard lesson, cut his hand off, and he was ready to teach him some harsh lessons in life, but he wanted him by his side to rule the galaxy as father and son. And then he wanted Leia to be there too, because, maybe she'd be receptive to the dark side. He wanted his kids involved in his life. Padme,
that's more than we can say about her.
She effed off because she died of a Anakin, you're breaking my heart. Shut up. God damn it. I've never liked Padme. I could say it now that we're here in this final. Padme sucks.
She's hot in the second film. That's what she has going for her.
And I will say that because she was very fit in that white outfit. Very fit. But Padme as a character sucks. Never liked Padme. She was an idiot in the first movie. She was even dumber in the second movie. And she is a coward in this movie. She's a coward. We can't explain why she's dying. She's dying of a broken heart. What? You've got 2 kids. They need you. Leia didn't abandon her children. Real Leia, not,
I was about to say.
Not Leia Poppins. Leia had, and Leia sees some shit with her kids. Leia watched 2 of her kids die, okay? And one of them had to kill the other one. Han never abandoned his kids. Leia never abandoned hers. Luke abandoned kids. They don't abandon their children, but Padme abandoned their kids. Plain and simple. You could thirst after Natalie Portman all you want, but Padme sucks. She abandoned her kids. And I'm not going to
argue with that.
And she's here for one line. No, this is how democracy dies, with thunderous applause. She's there for the line. That's her moment. That's her moment.
I do have to say, these films have no idea what the definition of democracy is.
No, they don't. They don't. Republic,
none
democracy,
whatsoever.
Yeah,
they're not synonyms, people.
I know. Yeah. Even though the government design of the Republic is a democratic design, it's because it's that parliamentary democratic design. It's democratic design. It's not a pure democracy, because pure democracy doesn't work.
No, it's not democracy. It's a republic. It's a democratic, which is important. But democracy and democratic are similar terms, but they're not.
It's
different.
The same camp and belief system where you have votes and representation.
Yeah, it's the power of the people is important, but it's not a democracy. And she says they all say it so much, but it's not true.
Yeah, and because the republic is here's the thing, it's a single house representation with just a Senate, with an elected leader, a parliamentary leader who can be deposed with the votes of no confidence, just like real world parliamentary leaders can be deposed with votes of no confidence. But then it suddenly has republic type representation where planets have their representation in the Senate, but the planets still govern themselves. They don't actually. They only have to. They abide by galactic rules when it comes to trade and when it comes to certain types of laws, but it's only within the Republic. So it's a mishmash, and it shows that George doesn't understand how.
And that's why he can't make so much of the prequels about politics, because he doesn't understand.
Yeah, he doesn't understand it. Yeah, he doesn't get it.
And there's a lot of problems with that. And the Senate has never been portrayed, even in Phantom Menace. It's like the Senate is corrupt. No one likes the Senate. Politicians suck. They say that even in Phantom Menace. I don't believe even if there's this risk of a rebellion, even at the end of a war, I don't believe that they will clap to have their power taken away. Yes, I know the Senate still is in place for another 19 years, but they have to know once it's an empire, they can't depose Palpatine with a vote of no confidence. That is them giving up their power. They are actively giving up their power. Politicians don't do that.
I'm not going to go out of the realm of the possibility that at that point, that's forced persuasion on a grand scale by Palpatine. He is manipulating everything at that point. He is in full power. He's got his key people because his inner circle, you can see when the revelations of after the attack by Mace Windu, his aides, they all know he's a freaking Sith Lord.
Oh yeah,
they know that. So
the blue tendril dude who's in all three.
That God, what is that race's name? I just forgot. I just forgot. I had it. It's one of the moments. There's so many race names for Star Wars. It's like right there on the tip of my tongue. Ruskin. They're his Ruskin aide. He knows. The bald chick knows. The other aliens, they all know, and therefore he's got people in all key places know who and what he is. They all know because it's Palpatine working, and that's why I love it. But yeah, screw Padme. And as far as the government goes, it makes sense then all the way in New Hope. By the time you get there, he's been limiting the Senate's powers more and more for 2 decades at that point. So when he completely collapses it in the beginning of A New Hope, and they're all questioning, well, how are we going to do this? Well, no, the Moffs are going to govern everything now. They'll be in charge of individual sectors because that was the whole thing. Eventually, the plan, not to have representation at all. But that's different discussion. Way out of there. Way grander Star Wars lore discussion. Padme sucks. Bad word. Okay, let's talk the finale. Then the whole battles. I do enjoy Yoda versus Sidious, but it's not perfect because it's all CGI.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I think it looks better than the Count Dooku Yoda fight from Attack of the Clones. It's still over the top and ridiculous, though.
I think it would have been better if they hadn't had so many jump cuts and were jumping back into certain parts in the fight. Because at one point it's like, where's Palpatine's lightsaber? How did he lose it? And now we're doing telekinetic battle. Yoda spinning the dais, the platform. That's always, I scratch my head at that one. Because why Palpatine's just gonna stand there and laugh while he sees it frozen in the air and starting to spin. That their whole battle doesn't make a lot of sense. The only thing that does make sense is at the end after Yoda and Palpatine basically reach a stalemate because Palpatine can't beat Yoda in a force battle, in a force display, because Yoda knows how to cancel out force lightning and rebound it. It makes sense though that when Yoda falls to the bottom, he's gassed. He is done. That was the last he was ever going to be able to do in a full-on fight. He gave it his all, and Palpatine still had more gas in the tank. So there's no way he would be able to keep it going. So his retreat makes sense. And I'm okay with that. But the whole battle itself, even though it's supposed to give a back and forth between the two different battles going on, I still wish they hadn't done it. I would have liked seeing each battle individually instead of cutting back and forth, because then you cut back and suddenly Anakin's choking out Obi-Wan with his cybernetic hand. Which makes sense in that sense because that hand is going to be stronger.
Yeah, it is an advantage.
Yeah, and Anakin's using it. But the whole battle on Mustafar, it's an A-rank fight.
Oh, absolutely. The character work's not as strong as the Return of the Jedi or pretty much any of the original trilogy ones, but it is the best fight. Just if you're watching a fight individually, it is the most epic of all 6 movies. It is top tier.
And the choreography is spot on. As we said, every single track there's only one track that is Battle of Heroes, but the whole thing is the Battle of Heroes. It is great because this is the thing that everybody for decades said, okay, if we're gonna tell a past Star Wars story, we want to see Mustafar. Or before, it didn't have always a name, but I mean, I'll be honest. When I was a little kid, I knew that we all knew the fight happened, but I swore I read somewhere that Anakin fell in acid, not fire. When I was this little kid memory, I'd read it someplace in an encyclopedia or something. So I had it in my brain for years that his body was acid damaged, not from heat, flame. So, and I never knew where it happened. And of course, George was years before he solidified Mustafar was Mustafar. But this is the scene that everybody wanted to see. They wanted to see Anakin versus Obi-Wan. And we got it. Except for high ground. I have the high ground.
When they started talking, it was rough. When they're actually fighting, it's great. Like the beginning and then the dialogue is just bananas awful.
Yeah. But it's some of it is
new empire.
Yeah. And here's the thing. They hadn't shown a moment where Anakin actually heard the word empire in the
That's
movie's
what I was
dialogue.
thinking.
That is a problem in the editing. And I mean, Palpatine has said empire multiple times, but Anakin was never present. And so we didn't know unless you have to go with it was an off-camera discussion because we know they had a couple of communications between him leaving Coruscant and Mustafar because he reported this and that. Oh, and because we get that moment, which I have gone back to over and over again, when Obi-Wan and Yoda are in the Jedi archives or the Jedi Temple, resetting the beacon. When Obi-Wan goes in and sees the youngling deaths, he then sees Palpatine call Anakin Vader, Lord Vader. So I had to use that moment as evidence during the whole Obi-Wan TV show crap where people were going, "Oh my God, he just learned he's our Darth Vader." It's like he always knew he was Darth Vader. The movie told us he knew he was Darth Vader right there. So it doesn't matter that Obi-Wan was in personal exile on Tatooine watching over Luke. You would hear the news of a guy called Darth Vader wreaking havoc across the galaxy. That would make him know that Anakin was still alive. Because he's only like one of 4, maybe 5 people that know that Anakin is Darth Vader. And we'll get into that at the very end again. But the battle itself, A+, A rank. I have a good time, except for, like we said, except for high ground. It's just,
it is a little over the top sometimes, like the swinging on the wires, going down the lava river, the lava waterfall. Like it goes kind of wild.
But you're camp. It's camp, and you're into it. And because here's the thing: watching today, it was reinforced the whole point of it's Obi-Wan on the defense the entire time. Because Anakin's the aggressor time. Obi-Wan is always giving ground to Anakin the entire fight. He never has the offensive. So in that one moment when Obi-Wan decides to go on the offensive, he has the high ground and he wins the fight. Now, was Obi-Wan the stronger duelist? That's up for debate. We don't know. I mean, Anakin has been promoted at this point as the best of the best. I feel as though I keep coming back. The high ground thing, it's the one letdown for me on the fight. It really is. I wish they'd executed it a different way. I mean, how do you feel about it? That moment? Because I've always have a problem with the angle where he's able to cut off an arm and 2 legs in one sweep.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. So the end of the fight is really rough on a lot of levels. The fight itself's phenomenal, but not just the high ground comment. There's a lot of dialogue that's rough in that. I mean, like you underestimate my power. I mean, that's mostly Hayden Christensen's bad delivery, but it's wild that he cuts off 3 limbs at once. He rolls perfectly where he doesn't catch fire right away, but he does in a second. And like, it's rough. Obi-Wan's speech right after cutting Anakin apart is great. Like, you were the chosen one. Ian McGregor does a phenomenal job for those few seconds there.
Yeah. But. And then it's the last 20 minutes of the movie. The fallout, Padme sucks. The twins are born. And I know this is, people make fun of it, but I love this.
Oh God, that is awful.
I love it. I used to have it on command for a button for stuff. It's
the worst part about it though is he reused that no in Return of the Jedi. I hate
that was retarded. That's George being retarded. That was dumb. That's an edit that made, because that's in the original cuts, even the original special edition cut, that is a beautiful show don't tell moment where Vader's looking back and forth between Palpatine and Luke, and this Luke suffering. And in that moment, Anakin returns. And it's an all action moment of action speaking for the words, action speaking for your feelings. No, you don't need to go, no, you don't need that.
Yeah.
And it was unnecessary. But I love the no because of it's so cringe. It's one of those moments, it's so cringe. I love it. Because and also I do love in the background, Palpatine's going like this. He's standing there grinning, like, I just ruined your life even more. You're more mine than ever. Did you ever see the comic panel of that?
I don't think so.
Oh, Palpatine's grin is even better. He's like this. Even more. It's even more super villain campy in the comic, the way he stands there grinning as he manipulated Vader into thinking he killed Padme. It's fabulous. I love it. But then that's the movie. I mean, we talked about the things that I think we wanted that were most important to us in this. I'm okay with them watching the Death Star being built, even though I have to do a little canonical gymnastics to figure out that it's been years at this point.
That has to be a time jump. If that's not a time jump, which doesn't work with how Obi-Wan's scene on Tatooine is fit in there.
Yeah,
but
because the Death Star wasn't being built yet. And
you can't have it being halfway done after a couple years, and then 20 years later they finally finish the other.
Yeah, because I have to as an EU guy, I have to canonically make it work with the Maw installation, where the Death Star was refined and developed over there. That's where there is where the prototype is, because that's where the prototype skeleton of the Death Star is, with just basically the shape and the reactor for the gun and a main cannon. And you have to realize, and now, fun little science sci-fi fact, the guy who is the stand-in for Tarkin in that moment on the bridge of the proto Star Destroyer, I don't know the name for the ship, I'm a bad fan, I know, that is Wayne Pigram, star of Farscape, who plays Scorpius. Just quick little cameo of him as Tarkin right there for the Farscape fans. So just I was told that a few years ago. I was like, damn, that's Wayne Pigram. Yes, because I love Wayne Pigram. He's great in Farscape. So he's just a stand-in for Tarkin right there. Better than having ugly digital Tarkin that Disney tried to do. That's god awful, terrible. But
I don't even know if you need Tarkin at that point, because it is 20 years.
It's his. Well, you do, because the Death Star was his project. It was his baby. He was the one who he oversaw the Maw installation. He oversaw everything involved in it. So, and he put his most trusted follower, Admiral Natasi Dalla, in charge of Maw to oversee everything going on there. So it is important from a lore perspective to make sure that Tarkin is there with Palpatine and Vader, because those are the three most powerful men in the Empire: Palpatine, Vader, and Tarkin. Because at that time, Tarkin's the only Grand Moff. And not that moment, by the time we get to A New Hope. Right. And that brings us thing. Tarkin is one of the only 5 people that know Anakin is Vader: Palpatine, Yoda, Obi-Wan, Bail Organa, and Tarkin. Those are the only people who know that Anakin is Darth Vader. That's it. Other than that, it's the best kept secret in the galaxy. Well, until you get to Disney Galaxy, then everybody knows.
I wish they would have set up Bail better in the previous 2 films, because I know he was in Attack of the Clones, but like, he's not put up as a politician we can trust. He's not put up as being really any different than anybody else. But this one, it's like, we're going to trust him with everything. Yoda's working with him. Like, he's intimately involved in everything during the last act. Like, it just kind of comes out of nowhere that everyone's like, oh yeah, we trust him implicitly. I know there's more going on there.
That's the cut scenes with Natalie Portman and Padme, the forming the rebellion. And it's just kind of that's George, again, I think, rushing being lazy and kind of leaning into the whole, well, the old school fans know this, so I'm not gonna bother. They all know who Bail Organa is.
Yeah.
But it's the end, and then you get the replay of Owen Lars and Beru Lars holding Luke and looking into sunset. And listen, all I got to say is, taking this movie into account and skipping out even Disney Star Wars, even cutting out all Disney Star Wars stuff, that's a harsh 20 years they're going to spend to look the way they do in New Hope on that desert, man.
It's true.
But
even more so than that, the scene's dramatic. It has good music, but what He just walks up, hands him a baby, doesn't say anything, and
Well,
then
I'm gonna assume there was a communication that there was
it's
there
still
was
so
something sent
weird. You
there.
don't want to say anything. Owen doesn't even turn around to see him. That's not natural human behavior. Even if they knew what was going on, it's still just like it's just so like take out the music. You would think that it was
Well,
awkward as hell.
I've heard if you take out the music in a lot of this stuff, it's really bad. Without the music, a lot of things across the board fall apart because
It's like when people say Friends isn't actually funny. It's just the laugh track that makes you think it is. We need to do the same thing to Star Wars: is remove the laugh track, remove the good
Yeah.
music.
I do that in anything, I think, and you're gonna
Yeah.
probably have a problem because a lot of these movies which we've reviewed over the past couple of years, when we have these epic soundtracks, the soundtracks are integral.
Mhm.
If you do not have the soundtrack, it doesn't have a movie. We already talked about it a little bit, so we're not gonna. And it's the same. Only reason I'm not gonna spend really time on it is it's the same conversation we have every time. John
Yeah.
Williams is as much a star of this movie as everybody on the screen.
Oh, he's doing better than everyone else in the prequels. Like in the original trilogy, it's just a masterclass of so many talented people giving it their all. Like you can't
Yeah.
really say one person in editing and special effects, anything like that, is the star. When it comes to the prequels, it's unequivocally John Williams. He's the only one who I say is on top of his game.
He
100% of
didn't
the
lose
time.
a step. I mean, this is 25 years ago, almost 30 years ago. He still was at the top of his game at that point. He had so much nuance and creativity for what he was doing, and it still showed. It still showed. The Revenge of the Sith soundtrack is the best of the prequel trilogy. It's right up there. It's tied with Jedi for me.
Mm.
It's tied with Jedi. Empire is still the best one. I like it better than A New Hope because A New Hope doesn't. A New Hope has some of the classic, recognizable themes, but overall, it's not as good as the other one because it's missing some of the later classic themes that he penned in Empire and Jedi. Because that's why Revenge of the Sith works because there are some themes where he weaves in Leia's theme at the end. He weaves in Luke's theme. He weaves in the Imperial March. He weaves in the Sith theme that you get in Return of the Jedi when we first meet Palpatine in the throne room. So he weaves in the original stuff, and that's why Revenge of the Sith soundtrack, in my opinion, works because you get those classic themes that are already well known, seamlessly made a part of the newer stuff that he wrote for it. That's why it helps it bring it to life even more. But that's it. As I said before, I mean, I like this movie. I've made a lot of peace with it over the years. I wanted a different movie, but this is the one we got. It's never going to change. It is what it is. But I still like it and I enjoy it. I don't have a hate boner like I once did for it. And I can live with it because it's still real Star Wars. I still watch this. End of the day, all criticize, and we didn't even get to probably every criticism I have of this movie because there's only two of us here today, and we could go on forever. And I didn't really structure it to go around each one, but I still walk away thinking I just spent 2 hours of watching Star Wars, and that's the thing. I want to bring this up to conclude here. It's over 2 hours long, but it doesn't feel like it to me whenever I watch it. It doesn't. I feel like I just sat here for 2 hours watching a movie. It's like I just had an enjoyable period of time, and I feel entertained. And that's the most important thing for me. I feel entertained. All right, so there we go. Jed, any final thoughts on Revenge of the Sith?
Revenge of the Sith. It's unequivocally the best of the prequels. I still have a lot of fun with it. It's the only prequel that I will voluntarily watch at any given time. Like I still enjoy this movie. It's got a lot of flaws, even flaws that I recognized the last time I watched it because that was a very long time ago. But it's still a decent film. There are things to love about this one that I can't say about the others. I think it is overrated modernly because some people like put it up with the original trilogy. Some people say it's the best Star Wars film objectively, and stuff like that I find insane.
Yeah,
but
it can be a favorite Star Wars movie.
Absolutely. But saying it's the best, I mean, it's better than someone saying Attack of the Clones is the best one objectively, which has happened recently.
From 3PO, we're looking at you.
Yes. Yes, but it's a lot of fun. Overrated these days. I think when it came out, it was received. I mean, like it got the least hate when it came
got
out.
the least hate. I think a lot at that point, the people who were the prequel trilogy fans, would later be known as the prequel trilogy defenders, they were all in, no matter what was going to happen, and they carried the banner long and far for it. And those of us on the other side, because I was not a defender, I was a mild hater. I said my piece, and then I just kept reading the EU, and I said I don't care. I've got all my books. I'm fine. Okay. And then Clone Wars came out, and I just went, motherfucker. I wasn't happy at that back then, and I'm still not happy now. But that's a different story altogether. But all right, so I agree with you. It all complaints aside, it's the best of the prequel trilogy. It's fun. I always feel rewarded in terms of my time spent, and I don't regret it. I watch this movie at least 3, maybe 4 times a year, I think, in conjunction with watching Star Wars. So I am happy to give it an 8 out of 10. Perfectly fine giving it an 8 out of 10 because it gets the job done. It's not as good in my book as the original trilogy, but it's better than Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. Jed, where are you on this?
I think this will be very familiar score to the people who've been watching the last few weeks. It's definitely better, but it's not leaps and bounds masterpiece improvement. So I'd give this one a 5.5, which is a full point above what I gave Attack of the Clones. Like it's absolutely an improvement into okay territory. It's still not a good film, I'd say, but it is an okay film. Whereas the other two, I would say borderline bad, but yet definitely an improvement.
But it's in the end, it's all real Star Wars. And it is leaps and bounds better than anything Disney's put out for the past, 2012, now 12 years, 13 years almost. Leaps and bounds. Because it has the spirit. And George may make these bad decisions here and there, but his decisions are still done within the realm of Star Wars. And it's still him. If he made it, it's still Star Wars, whether I like it or not. So, anyway, there we go. Jed, it's your choice next week. You've got something ready for me, don't you?
I do. I decided to mix things up. We've done a lot of sci-fi over the last few months and even some period pieces, but nothing like what we're doing next week. I decided it's time we do just a pure drama. Not an action film, a drama.
Okay.
It's one that I very, very much enjoy. It's about 10 years old. I don't think you've seen it. I think I've asked you about it before.
Okay.
But it is the story of King George leading up to the events of World War II, overcoming his speech impediment. It would be the King's Speech.
Okay. No, I have never seen it.
I love this movie. I'm excited to talk about it. Jeffrey Rush and Colin Firth just
I like Jeffrey Rush. I like Jeffrey Rush, so that is a positive. I was never really interested in this movie, so it wasn't whether or not I hate or love it. It's just never, not the type of historical movie I'm usually interested in. So there we go. So next week, The King's Speech will be back 6 p.m. Eastern, maybe a little later. I think I gotta get my haircut next week, but I will let you know, guys. Exactly. So once again, Jed, thanks for being here. Everybody in the chats, thank you for joining us. As always, we appreciate your support. Whether you agree with me or not, I still love each and every one of you. I thank you for being here. We will see you guys this week. Until then, guys, take it easy and stick around on both our channels. In about an hour, we're going to talk Doctor Who. We're going to try anyway, because it's not Doctor Who. Anyway, thanks, everybody. See you later.